Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Rollins, and I read Gaijin, American Prisoner of War by Matt Faulkner. This book detailed the life of a Japanese American boy living in California after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. My initial impressions of this book is that it is intriguing and in a very engaging way to gain the perspective of Japanese Americans who were placed in internment camps during World War II. The book follows the life of a Japanese American boy with an American mother and a Japanese father who is still in Japan. In the beginning of the book, the boy and his mother hear on the radio about Pearl Harbor, and then the author he goes on to describe the persecution of the Japanese at the hands of the American military in the United States. The author cites random inspections of Japanese American citizens and of how other American citizens treated or talked down to the Japanese in general. In a scene early in the book, the boy, who's the main character, his name was Koji, he's bullied and gets in a fight with his American peers because of how they were treating him. Um, he also faced discrimination when he wasn't allowed to ride the trolley in San Francisco because of his ethnicity. When he gets home, his family's house and belongings are being searched by the American government. He was constantly interrogated by police and had a curfew, and there was a curfew set for other Japanese Americans. Eventually, they even got to the point where the boy was sent to the internment camp, and that's kind of the main basis of the story. The mother did not want Koji to go to the camp alone, so she went with him. The story detailed the conditions of the internment camp. It was at an old um, racetrack, and it was cramped, crowded, dirty, smelly. They even had to sleep in a horse stall that smelled like manure. So when they got there, they clean it all out just so they could sleep, which I thought was just horrible. Um, and then while in the internment camp, Koji faced farther, and some other Japanese, but Koji especially, faced farther discrimination from Japanese boys because he wasn't 100% Japanese. He was called derogatory names because of this, and he was involved in several conflicts and fights. Koji battled numerous internal conflicts throughout the books. I thought this was a very big point. He was nervous that his father was fighting for the Japanese because, like I said earlier, the father was still in Japan, and even thought he was part of the bombing campaign on Pearl Harbor. He developed a friendship with an older Japanese man while in the internment camp, but struggled whether or not to remain loyal to the man when a group of Japanese boys he feuded with earlier began to accept him. He questioned his mother's loyalty to his father. So he had all these battles internally that he was going through in the book that really showed a good perspective of what it might be, what life might be like for a Japanese American teenager during this time. Finally, when people began to discover that they were going to be moved to another camp in the middle of the desert, the gang of Japanese boys were sure that they were going to be killed by the American government, and they planned to escape with the help of Koji. Eventually, the old man that Koji befriended, he he helped out Koji during this escape and rescued him, so he didn't face further punishment from the American military while the other group of boys were sent to some type of juvenile detention camp. And then the next morning, Koji and 8,000 other Japanese Americans were relocated to another camp in the desert. And then after the conclusion of World War II, Koji and his mother went back home to San Francisco, where they finally were able to get dozens of letters from his father. And then the following year, Koji went to Tokyo to see his father, and that's kind of how the book ended. The most interesting part of this book, I thought, were those internal battles that Koji faced throughout the book. I thought the author did a really good job of showing the wide range of emotions he had to have felt going through this just horrendous time in his life. I found it interesting how the author made the main character of Japanese and American descent, because it made the story just so much more compelling, and there was so much more depth to the main character, to Koji. There was nothing in this book that I really disagreed with. Instead, I found the decisions the characters made to be quite realistic. The author highlighted the harsh treatment of Japanese Americans by the U.S. government and just by average citizens. They showed the harassment that Japanese Americans faced on a daily basis and the constant struggles they had to endure. I think students in my classroom are get a lot out of this reading and truly understand, or better understand, the perspective of Japanese Americans. Throughout this book, I felt just awful for Koji and what he had to endure. It wasn't fair, nor did he deserve any of the treatment that he received, not only from the Americans, but also from the Japanese in the internment camp. I felt ashamed, I think, and I think a lot of other people would too, that the American government treated its citizens this way. I tried to put myself in the government's shoes. I know up to that point in U.S. history, there was never such a devastating attack on the United States. Um, and many Americans were fearful, they were untrusting of any Japanese Americans. And I think that they felt that they had no other choice but to commit these atrocities by interning Japanese Americans. But I just kept going back, finding more sympathy with the Japanese Americans, and the way they were treated was just horrible. There had to have been something else that could have been done. Throughout this book, I learned about the treatment of the Japanese Americans in the internment camps. I always and never thought they were living glamorous lifestyles, but um, it was they were mistreated and lost just about every ounce of freedom that they had. So that was something I kind of took away from it. I was also able to better understand the way they were treated by average American citizens during this time. Once again, I understand everyone is fearful, and I do remember right after 9/11 and its aftermath, there was a lot of discrimination and hostility towards Muslim Americans, but the level of respect shown to Japanese Americans was just appalling, unwarranted, and it was something that's quite eye-opening, and I feel like it would be it would be eye-opening to my students as well. Overall, I found this book to be an engaging, extremely relevant read. Once again, I feel the author did a fantastic job of showing the perspective of the Japanese Americans throughout World War II and the hardships they had to go through. I thought it was very unique in the fact that it showed how Japanese Americans interacted among each other. The author was able to effectively display different aspects of culture and change, as well as people, places, and environments. All of these elements were present in the story, and it would give students a whole new idea of what else was going on in America during World War II. I think many educators and teachers focus on the war effort here in the U.S., as well as the battles overseas. They learn about Hitler, the Holocaust, the war in the Pacific, and the fact that we interned Japanese Americans. However, a lot of teachers don't really go into detail about exactly what those Japanese Americans went through and how they felt, and how they were treated, and exactly what was going on on a daily basis in their life. So I think this book gives teachers a fantastic opportunity to show that to students so they can gain an entirely new perspective on what it was like, or what it would have been like to be a Japanese American during World War II in the United States. Thank you.